Because by the way, doing what you love doesn't mean you always love what you're doing. If you do what you love, that means it's worthwhile enough. You love it. It's worthwhile enough that there's going to be pain involved. Look at every athlete on the planet. They don't love playing basketball, let's say, every single second. They hate when they lose. They hate when they miss a shot, but that kind of compels them to be better. And
hey, Nick Nanton here, and thanks for tuning in to Now to Next. I want to make sure you don't miss a single episode of this show on YouTube. So before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, just go into your settings and switch on notifications. Thanks for watching. Hey everybody, Nick Nanton here, and I have a good friend and guest here with me today, and we are here live at the moment on Facebook. It is actually election day. If you're hearing this, well, hopefully we all make it through this, and this isn't some archive you find underneath a bunker or something. But James Altucher, welcome to the show. I want to talk about your new audiobook. I want to talk about the new book coming out. Was it How to Skip the Line, which we'll talk about that. But before that, you talk about your own health. And obviously one thing that I think people should know, they should watch. It took me over a year to make it with you. Your documentary series, it's all on Amazon, called Choose Yourself, the James Altucher story. It's based on your work of your first, of your biggest book, I think, Choose Yourself, which really goes through your ups and downs in life and amazing success, amazing failure, and your journey to what were you doing differently on the way up than you're doing on the way down. You started to mention sort of the four bodies, if you will, from that book. I would love for you to share a little bit of the choose yourself mentality. And I think one of the things we all need to be doing right now, there is a pandemic all the time in our culture of waiting for someone to tell you you're good enough. Now is the time. I've been working with musicians and bands and writers for years who are just waiting for that one person to validate them so they can get started. I know your message to them is way different than that. Give us a little bit of the choose yourself mentality and the choose yourself message.
That's a great way to put it, that we have a pandemic of wanting other people to give us permission, because you hear it from your friends, like when you're growing up, you can't be an entrepreneur. You can't get that great job. You can't have a lot of money unless you go to college, or you can't just be the CEO of a company. You got to start off as the assistant to the marketing manager for Crest toothpaste or whatever. Or you just can't start a new career at the age of 35. It'll take you too long to catch up to everyone else. And so we get put into a box that everyone else puts us into, but we let them create the walls of the box. No one's going to put you in a box if you don't let them do it. But it's really hard. I don't blame anyone for letting others choose their life. No, everybody wants you to stay in your place. Everybody likes you just the way you are. They don't want you to suddenly say, hey, I'm going to go off and try to achieve something big. They're going to say, you can't do that. You can't leave me behind. That's what they're really saying. You can't leave me behind. You can't make it so that you're going to succeed, but maybe I won't. Don't do that. So it's very important that at every step of the way, you're doing what you can to find your success, find out what your passions are, find out what you're willing to be persistent with. Because by the way, doing what you love doesn't mean you always love what you're doing. If you do what you love, that means it's worthwhile enough. You love it. It's worthwhile enough that there's going to be pain involved. Look at every athlete on the planet. They don't love playing basketball, let's say, every single second. They hate when they lose. They hate when they miss a shot, but that kind of compels them to be better. And, same thing with a writer. You could spend years writing a book. You put the book out and then no one reads it. Hopefully you love writing, because you're going to be miserable in that one point, or being an entrepreneur. Some businesses work, some don't. So you have to give yourself permission to do the things that everybody else says you can't do, and you have to be willing to ride a different type of psychological roller coaster, because there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows. You've seen me through those even during the course of shooting your excellent Choose Yourself series. And so the Choose Yourself mentality is that on several levels. One is, I can choose what I'm interested in. I don't have to listen to my parents about it. I don't have to listen to my teachers. I don't have to listen to my friends or my colleagues. I can choose what I love. And you know what? I can switch or give up or move on whenever I want to something new. And I'm always going to have the opportunity to get good at it or to do something unique or to find my voice. If I love doing this and it's worth doing, and if I'm going to be persistent with it for at least a while, I'm going to get good. I'm going to choose myself. But at a deeper level, you can't choose yourself unless you take a step back and do 4 things. I call this the daily practice because whenever I stopped doing this, I would go broke, and I would go so broke. I would be suicidal because how am I going to, and you've met my kids, like how am I going to raise my children? How am I going to feed my family? How am I going to afford this home? And sometimes I couldn't. I've lost homes. I couldn't afford anything. And I would get scared. And then finally, I was like the 3rd or 4th time this happened, I was like, what am I doing wrong? I think I'm somewhat smart. I shouldn't be failing all the time. Success, failure, success, failure. And I realized the important things is no matter what, be physically healthy. You can't have great ideas and execute on them if you're sick. So eat, move, sleep well. Emotionally healthy. You can't have good ideas if you're arguing with your spouse all day or arguing with your friends all day or arguing with your kids all day. Every day, do something to move the needle on emotional health. Creativity. Every single day, I write down 10 ideas a day. I write, they could be business ideas, book ideas, article ideas, ideas for Nick, ideas for Google, ideas for LinkedIn, ideas for someone else that I think of, or just what I learned from X, what I learned from Y. Anything I can do to exercise the creativity muscle, because it is a muscle. And if you don't exercise it, it'll atrophy in a few weeks. If you exercise it every day, you'll see within 3 or 4 months, it'll be like a super idea machine. You will, it's, once I started doing this in 2002, and I was so depressed. I was losing my home. I had lost everything. I had been depressed for like a year. Medication wasn't helping. I started doing these 10 ideas a day. And within just a few weeks, I was like, oh, this is an unusual feeling. I was feeling excited again. And I had ideas. And yeah, they were bad ideas, but still, like, my mind was going. I was thinking during the day about the ideas I had written down, and it was exciting to me. So that's really the foundation. When you build that foundation, now I can have ideas for a book. Now I can have ideas for a new business idea. Oh, I like this one song. What if I put a hip hop beat to it? And now I've got a new song because I combine 2 things. Or what if I, took my interest in, poker and applied it to learn lessons in persuasion and wrote an article about that or made a book out of it or made a chapter in a book about it. So there's all sorts of things that could start happening where you combine ideas. So can I give you this one example of this project that came out of nothing? A friend of mine is Charlemagne the God, who's the host of the radio show, The Breakfast Club. Remember he had that interview with Joe Biden where he says, we have questions. And Joe Biden says, listen, if you don't know who you're going to vote for by now, then you ain't black. And so so that part aside, I wrote to Charlemagne and I said, I love the phrase, we have questions, because I don't know lots of things. I don't know what your questions are. I don't know what the answers are. And I'd want to know, like, this is like a rallying cry. We have questions. And so we went back and forth. There's a lot more to the story, but my 10 ideas for that day was, here's some questions I have that I don't know. And I'd like to know, even if they're like provocative or weird or whatever. And he's like, hey, let's work on this together. So we spoke to Amazon, and their Audible's producing this. Charlemagne is technically the author with me. And he gathered together 13 prominent African-American leaders. I interviewed them kind of almost podcast style, but I got to ask all the questions I had written them and then some. And now this is going to be, so just me sharing my idea list with somebody. Suddenly now this audiobook that Audible's produced. They're going to release in a big campaign, and it's exciting. And they've got, more or less most of it was finished in just a few weeks worth of work. And Charlemagne and I both put a lot of time and energy into it. But that's a consequence of exercising this idea muscle and then sharing ideas. A lot of times people have a scarcity mindset. Like, I can't share my idea. What if he steals the idea? Let them steal the idea. Like, what if somebody had taken my ideas and did it all on their own? that's fine. I'm happy when that happens because I know I'm abundant with ideas. I know every day I'm coming up with ideas. I can't possibly do all of them. What if you share a business idea and they steal it? Good for them. If they can do a business better than I can, better for the world. So, or they can't do it. And somehow it's the one business in 15 years I do, and then I do it. So most business ideas I come up with, I never do. I just write down my idea list for the heck of it. And so, and again, I don't keep track of the ideas. I just do it to exercise. So in terms of what I learned more than ever that, we've all been through an emotionally rocky time. The fear of the pandemic, the fear of the lockdowns, and the friends and family and colleagues we saw who were having financial difficulties and whatever financial difficulties, we all had along the way, and then the protests and trying to understand those. And then the election, there's so much hate and fear going around in the election. It's kind of clear being on social media for most purposes is a bad thing because everyone was just, all these trolls were just yelling at you. No matter what you believed on social media, like no matter what I said on social media, I was always called a Republican fascist and a Democrat libtard. No matter what I said, people thought the same thing about every comment I made. And then I realized all these smart, intelligent people that I always looked up to, they were acting like complete idiots on social media. And I realized, everybody's having problems. People have to continually, self-correct, or else they kind of fall into this either idiocy or a funk or whatever. And again, with this New York City is dead forever article, my intent was to help New York City. I love New York City. I live in New York City. It's my city since birth. And then I saw the reaction people had, even people who were family or friends or people I've known for 30 or 40 years were writing articles trashing me, particularly when they felt it was safe to do so. Oh, everybody else is trashing him, I'll pile on also. That probably ultimately got to me. The other million people who trashed me, I didn't care as much. But then when I realized how the message was being manipulated and people I had known for 30 years it was starting to get to me. So I had to make sure I was following my own daily practice.
That's great. A couple different things there. Do you feel like was there a net positive or net negative from that article overall?
Well, two things. One is net positive in the sense that I do think it created awareness in New York City. I mean, look, it's 2.5 months since I wrote that article, more than 2.5 months since I wrote that article. And still every day people are writing about it, usually negatively, but people are writing about it and people are finally starting to notice the issues and connect all the dots. I mean, look, even de Blasio and Cuomo, who hate each other, came together in their hate for me. And so that encouraged me that maybe solutions would happen. And I've been working on solutions. So this article gave me kind of an open door to call people, whether it's mayoral candidates or congressmen or Federal Reserve officials or even Trump administration officials. I talked to all those categories and I presented solutions, or I presented the problems, and I brainstormed solutions with people. So it gave me a lot more knowledge about how a city is run and what possible solutions there could be. In terms of me personally, like let's say, on social media and stuff, I think my name recognition might have gone up, but I don't know if people gain followers in the same way anymore. Like I didn't really get a huge number of new followers, but I would say that people who liked the article definitely saw the work I put into it and how I did care, in fact, about the city. And it was kind of exciting to have so many people, like everybody from Joe Rogan to Glenn Beck to Rush Limbaugh to MSNBC, CNN, all these different places had my article or read it word for word on their shows and or mentioned it. And that was exciting.
Yeah. I mean,
I think my publisher got nervous.
You started a discussion, which is, I think, interesting. I mean, I would say that if there was like a board game that was James Altucher, it would be a conversation starter. It would be like throwing a bomb in the middle of the table and let's see what happens. Like, to me, that's like, as I've watched you work, a lot of the way you approach things to me remind me a lot of my brother. Sort of, he can out debate me on either side of any issue, and I'm sure that I really know where he stands, first of all. But like you seem to seems to me like you like like the social experiment of some of these ideas more than you're tied to the idea.
That could be true. Like, first off, one person did accuse me of writing just for the sake of being controversial, which I think is the worst kind of writing possible. Like, I would never do that. I live in New York City. I saw the problems that are now pretty clear. Like, 8,000 restaurants or so are out of business now in New York City. When I wrote the article, it was probably around 3,000 restaurants. I mean, I can go on and on. The data has gotten significantly worse. So I did my research. I didn't write about London is dead forever. I didn't write about LA is dead forever. I wrote about my city that I love. If you just write to be controversial, you're going to run out of material pretty quickly, and no one's going to trust your opinion. So there's no purpose of writing just to get likes or a dopamine hit or whatever. You have to write about things you care about. That said, you have to write about things you care about, and you have to say something new and unique. You have to trigger, in order for people to read your article, you have to trigger cognitive dissonance. So if I say nobody should ever buy a home forever, no one should ever buy a home, that triggers huge cognitive dissonance, because buying a home is usually the largest financial decision one might make in their lives, at least up until the moment they buy a home. Or don't go to college. That also triggers huge cognitive dissonance, because many of us, including me, have spent 4 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars getting an education. And if someone just says, hey, you shouldn't, that was dumb, you shouldn't have done that, that's going to trigger cognitive dissonance. So the first reaction is to be defensive and to argue and maybe to be angry. Like, is this person questioning my life choices? I can't be wrong. And so you have to be able to say something new about a topic that is important, big enough to trigger cognitive dissonance. That's why it's important to be able to write about it. Why do you have to say something new? If I write what everybody else writes, what was the point of me writing? Like, there has to be a reason why I'm writing. Even in my New York City is Dead article, I brought up points that nobody else had ever brought up, which is why part of the reason it went viral, because I had something new in it. It triggered a lot of cognitive dissonance. Also very important, I told a story. I didn't just say, here's some facts about New York City. I interwove my love affair with New York in the article, which makes it emotionally intense and relatable. So that's the third component of a viral article. And, those are the important ones. But again, you have to be able to also address all the objections. So I can't write about New York City is dead without addressing the 1970s, without addressing 2001, without addressing 2008, because these are all times that people thought New York City was dead. And I had to be able to prove with facts that this time things are different. And, and I had to have those facts. So not only did I have to have facts, but I had to be able to answer all the objections. I had to steel man my argument, which means I had to argue the opposite side even better than I was arguing my own side in order to write that article.
I love that. And I actually was going to ask you a question, but I think I have a better question. I was going to ask you, do you think if your article had a positive title, if it would have gotten as many views and shares? But actually, I think you pointed out something that's way more important in the psychology of a headline and getting something read is just finding some cognitive distance. So I might write a positive article that here's why drugs are great. And it's not a negative headline, but it's a cognitive distance that makes me go, there's something not right about that. I need to read this. Would you agree with that point?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. A lot of people wrote articles. Like, this election's a great example. A lot of people write articles saying, "Well, Trump might win if he gets these states, but then Biden might win if he gets these states." Everybody hedges. Nobody says something concrete. People say, "Well, raising taxes might be good if these things happen, but also lowering taxes might be good if these things happen." It's like the news at the end of the day. Stocks went up because of oil fears, but tomorrow they might go down because of blah, blah, blah. Nobody really knows, but they try to hedge their reasoning as much as possible because they don't know. The people who stand out are the ones who say, no, this is going to happen. We should be worried about this, or we should be hopeful about this, because of X, Y, and Z. And so, for instance, March, the pandemic started. There was all this articles coming out that were negative. That the New York Times, I think it was, had an article: 140 million people worldwide might die from coronavirus. And the amazing math that they had was, well, there's 7 billion people on the planet, and it's a 2% fatality rate. Do the math; it's 140 million. That's the worst math I've ever seen for anything, because it can't mathematically be modeled like that. And so for me, what I did was I read all the research. There was research at Imperial College that with all these outrageous predictions, and that's where Fauci first got his ideas. Then the University of Washington had some research that also was missing some basic math. Finally, I saw some good research coming out of University of Southern California, which helped me to understand what was going on better. And then I talked to epidemiologists, I talked to virologists, I talked to economists, and then I explained the good news of what was happening. So then I was able to put something in a positive light, but it also was a popular article because people were being misinformed and they didn't know and they were scared and they didn't want to be scared. And so I was trying to interpret, almost like a translator, what was happening in the headlines and bring it and explain to the average person who wasn't absorbed in this where the headlines were wrong, where they were right, why it wasn't as bad as people thought. The headlines get paid to scare you. That's how they make money. The more fear, the more money they make. So you have to find other sources where either a source, someone in the middle who's going to explain correctly, or you go directly to the data, which is what I was doing. And then I started doing podcasts every single day instead of twice a week because there was so much misinformation I wanted to explain to people. So that's an example where I was positive, not negative. I didn't say, oh, the world's going to die because of coronavirus. But I did say, I said in late March, I said, okay, there's these lockdowns. If they continue past April, pandemic aside, maybe they need to continue, but the economy is not going to be able to come back in the same way. We're not going to have a new normal. We're going to have something new, something different, not a new normal, a new abnormal almost. And that's what happened. After April, the economy fractured in ways that are hard to fix, which led to the New York City story, which also, by the way, led to a lot of these protests. It led to a lot of the anger and the frustration that leads to a George Floyd and leads to more public acknowledgement that these George Floyd situations are happening all the time. And so voices needed to be heard. Everybody had been locked in place for 6 months. Protests started happening. So everything started to fracture. And so then there's new things to explain. Well, what's happening with the economy? Is it going to get better? What's actually happening with these protests? Why is there rioting? Why is there looting? Is that what MLK really intended when he said, rioting is the voices of the unheard? What's really going on here that everyone's quoting and misquoting and misinforming and so on? So, and again, I think, I'm just looking through my notes on my viral article. It was a 10 ideas list, but so I mentioned story, cognitive dissonance, facts, answer all the objections, and then finally you have to mention something new. So for instance, with the pandemic, the new things that I mentioned were I explained the math in a very simple way. I would explain the math equations around modeling a pandemic. And I think that was very useful for people. I got rid of the complicated math, but I also got rid of the hysteria and was able to explain people with something huge with something new. Plus with my story.
But James, there's a ton of lessons in there. One of the things that you seem to like to talk about an awful lot are ideas that it seems to me that you like to help people see that they've been maybe misinformed on a subject. I mean, you write a lot about education and how the sort of college system is broken and other things like that. I mean, what makes are these just truths you discover and you think that people they've been misled? Do you think there are truths that other people just haven't dug in so hard to figure out? Or what makes you so interested in sharing these opinions that when I read them, they seem like common sense, yet not always common knowledge? Obviously, in some of your belief systems, I think most of us reading it who sort of believe, let's say, down the middle would feel like you push the envelope on both sides, which is what's interesting about it. But what makes you want to share these ideas that aren't always that seem like they're hidden beneath the surface, but they seem pretty logical when you explain them?
Well, two reasons. One is people, there's trillions of dollars every year spent on, or let's say hundreds of billions spent on advertising. So when you think about an election, and I'm saying that because it's election day when we're talking, and it's obviously in everyone's mind, why was it the case that $10 billion was spent on this election, mostly with advertising? And it's because either people don't know the messages of the candidates, or the candidates want to manipulate their message so that you believe what they want you to believe so that you vote for them. And I'm not accusing them of this. This happens in banking. This happens in, hey, a diamond is a girl's best friend. It's just an advertising slogan. I don't know any woman where they say, oh, my best friend is a diamond. Like, it's just a marketing slogan. And, the diamond industry, of course, is manipulated by, one or two companies, an oligopoly. And so it's their incentive to spend a lot of the extra money they make keeping that marketing machine going. Same thing with the housing industry. Oh, owning a home is the American dream. Not really. You can not own a home and still live a great life in the US, maybe even a better life, because you're not as stressed about maintenance and property taxes and paying back this huge debt and on and on and on, or you don't get as worried in a financial crisis or a pandemic or whatever. So it's good to know what is the truth versus what's the signal versus the noise. And I feel like I have a skill at doing that, built up over 20 years of doing this style of writing. And I love writing. Like, if I write, oh, here's the time I went broke and here's how I bounced back. Well, nobody was writing that in 2010. Everybody was saying, oh, I know, I'm so smart. I know that Apple's stock is going to go up. I'm so smart. I'm going to tell you that there's going to be a crash next year. Well, here's someone who has had highs and lows. I've been a hedge fund manager. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a financial pundit on CNBC, but also I've gone broke several times, and it's really depressing, and it's okay to admit it, and it's okay to try to bounce back. And here's how you bounce back. Oh, sorry. Here's how you make something of yourself so that maybe you can protect yourself a little bit against failing again, or maybe you could switch careers. And again, like I said earlier, and this is related to my book, Skip the Line, coming out. Oh, you're 40 years old, you're 45, you're 55, you're 60. You can't switch careers. What do you think you're doing? No, I can do whatever I want. And here's some techniques this guy wrote so that I could literally skip the line and end up in the top 1% of my field and start monetizing the things that I love. Better late than never. I always think, like, I have about 30 Thanksgivings left on this planet, just 30. And what else am I going to do for those 30 Thanksgivings? Am I going to talk about doing things and jobs that I don't like? Or am I going to say, hey, I finally got a chance to write that novel, to do stand-up comedy, to create that business, to hang out and do, snorkeling with these friends, instead of just trying to be, get a promotion at my job and get, more insurance and more, whatever. So this is more about giving permission to others to do the things that I like to do as well, which is following my passions and getting good at them.
That's great. We're going to talk about Skip the Line again in a second. We can probably end on that. But now that the docuseries Choose Yourself, the James Altucher story, has been out on Amazon, I've been getting some interesting feedback. So reviews are the hardest thing ever to get on Amazon. I have been sort of laughingly saying it to friends, like, it's like the equivalent of trying to get someone to FedEx their baby overseas. Like, just people don't do it. But it's interesting. We have, I think, 11 reviews right now, 10 5-star reviews, and 1 1-star review. This guy's a fraud. Can't you guys see that? And it's so interesting to me how people just troll. But has anyone shared any feedback? I've gotten a lot of feedback from people just saying how fascinating just the way your mind works is. I know I learned a ton sort of traveling the world with you. Any feedback that you've gotten since the series has been out?
Yeah, I've gotten nothing but of course, I don't think anyone would say to me, hey man, your life story sucks. I don't think anyone, and they certainly wouldn't criticize you. Like, it was beautifully shot. It was this, you told a better story than I could have told about myself. So you did an unbelievable job. Everyone I've spoken to, like I have all these neighbors, and they all have started watching the series, or they've completely watched the series. And everyone's like, we thought we would watch like half of one and then go to sleep, and we stayed up all night and binge watched it. So I know some hardcore people who binge watched the entire thing in like one night. And so I think in general, it's been very exciting. By the way, I had to check. I don't see the 1-star review. Maybe they took it down.
I'm hope that'd be great. Great if they did, but also makes people want to know. Well, why does one guy think this is terrible? But it really was sort of an abusive review. It was nothing about the film. It was just this guy is a fraud. Which you have hate mail all the time. I actually get the worst comments on anything I ever do when I do anything with Anthony Scaramucci, who I really love. I have great dealings with him. A very polarizing figure in the media, but I love him. But anytime I tweet or send anything about Anthony Scaramucci, it's like 80. I don't know, maybe even 50-50. Like, oh, I'm so glad you learned from this, Anthony, or whatever. Like, or you're such an idiot. You're a nymph. You're an elf. Shut up, little guy. You suck. And it's just so funny to see the way the world processes things. One of the things, by the way, that I learned about that series, that's the first ever multi-part series that I had ever done, and I was so relieved that people were watching like from episode to episode, because we tried to divide it up in the way that to me would make sense. And you always have to have like a hook that pulls people into the next episode. But it was hard, just because I'd never done it before. And so, yeah, I've heard the same thing. People just get sucked through the whole thing. You should absolutely, this is blatant self-promotion right here. You should check out Choose Yourself, the James Altucher story on Amazon. If we're lucky. So just so you know, this is not monetary for us. We might make tens of dollars if we're lucky, because of the way Amazon pays. There's nothing we want to put out there so everyone could watch it and learn. So watch it, leave reviews, enjoy it. It's called Choose Yourself, the James Altucher story. Anyway, so much to learn from that. I'd love, any of you feedback is great. It was a super fun series to make, super educational. I learned a ton. Before we get to skip the line,
I just want to mention, Nick, I've had friends watch it and then they had their children watch it because they wanted their children to learn from it. I was surprised about this. My kids watched it. My kids binged it. Like, you already know everything about me. No, they loved it, and it was, again, your storytelling, and they didn't know some things about me, and you did a good job balancing things. Like, it was poignant, some of the moments with one of my daughters who was with us in Paris and London, and I remember she said to the interviewer when I wasn't there, I wish I could spend more time with my dad. And actually, I just spoke to her I'm making an effort to talk to her on the phone more. I just spoke to her right before this, and it even makes me tear up thinking about the scene in the show. But I think it was a really great way to express my ideas. And like I said earlier, interweave a story around that. And again, why do I bring these things up? Because why do I bring stories like, oh, I went broke and this is how I got back? Or here's what I think about XYZ situation. It's, again, because I think I'm offering something new, and B, I'm afraid. So I'm afraid of what people will think of me if I write this or if I put this out there. And that shows me that I'm expanding my comfort zone, which is always important. It's always healthy to surprise yourself and exercise your ability to get out of your own comfort zone. But B, it really, and by the way, and in doing so, you're writing something original and creative. But B, there is a point where you want to help people. And I like doing that. I feel a lot of people write their book. Like, people who like Trump say, this is why Trump's going to win. People who like Biden say, this is why Biden's going to win. People who like Apple stock say, this is why Apple stock's going to go up. But they don't really look full circle at things. And I think it's important to be authentic, to be vulnerable. And in vulnerability is the real currency of our time. We've got nothing else left but our vulnerability and our honesty. Money won't buy the truth. The truth will buy the respect of others and readers and listeners and followers and so on in the long run. And for the people who say, oh, this guy's a fraud or whatever, I don't know, point to something I've ever done where I've been fraudulent or not. Like, I don't even care. I know who I am. And it's just, it comes with the territory. But I will say this, people say, oh, it doesn't bother me, but I have a thick skin. It always bothers me. As much as I like to think I don't care what people think, it always bothers me. The anonymous trolls bother me. When my own family members write about me negatively, it bothers me. I can't help it.
I hear you. It's just human. It's funny. Like I have one film on Amazon that has over 1,250 reviews, and I find myself looking to scroll down the new ones because it gets 10 or 15 new ones a day. It's just kind of sort of viral
Wow.
there. And I scroll down and I just see like, oh, it's great, it's awesome, and then I get, but I stop and read the 1 stars. Like I just our mind is sort of, our brain is wired to look for that negativity, which is why negative news sells and all the other stuff. Skip the line. I want to actually talk to you about the process of that for a second. Even more. You should get the book whenever it comes out. You should get the book. But just before we finish on Skip the Line, one of the things I thought was super interesting too is that you seem to have an abundance of currency. Like your abundance comes from the currency of your ideas, I feel like, because you can always come up with another one. So you're not feeling limited by what most people covet is the idea, and they don't want someone to steal it. You mentioned it before. But it just crazy to think that something as simple as exercising your idea muscles, you call it, writing down 10 ideas a day, could my hypothesis for you is that gives you way more freedom than anybody else, because ideas you're never going to run out of ideas, and a lot of them don't work, but a few good ones can make a fortune and a great life. Just give me your perspective on that and how you think you mentioned it briefly earlier, but to me it just seems like your ideas and your ability to create ideas, and it could do the same for others, has given you a great sense of abundance.
Absolutely, because look, the reality is, in order to succeed, you need to be creative and you need to have ideas and you need to be able to execute on those ideas. People say ideas are a dime a dozen. That may or may not be true, but execution is a subset of ideas. You need to have ideas on how to execute in order to succeed as well. Like, let's say I have an idea for a software product. Well, how do I execute? Am I going to write the software? Am I going to hire a programmer on freelancer.com? Am I going to find a friend who's a programmer? Or am I going to raise $1 million and let the venture capitalists find programmers? There's a lot of different ways to execute, and how you do it defines the success or failure of an idea, of a business. So ideas are hand in hand with execution. And again, it's a muscle. You have to exercise it. It will atrophy. Here's an example. People think when they think of Einstein, they think of E equals MC squared. That's the main thing people think of. Well, Einstein wrote 285 peer-reviewed, published papers on physics. Maybe 3 of them or 2 of them, the special theory of relativity and the general theory of relativity, those are the ones we know. Picasso, he created 60,000 works of art. 60,000. We know maybe a dozen. Isaac Asimov wrote 560 books. We know Foundation and iRobot and some short stories. So on and on and on. All these great, creative, successful people, most of their ideas did not work out for them. The smartest people in the world, it was much more about quantity than quality. The quality falls out of the quantity. And also when you practice having ideas, like you said, you have this feeling like, okay, I didn't do this one. No big deal. I come up with 10 a day, which is 3,650 a year. I'll come up with another idea tomorrow. Maybe that one I'll feel like executing on. I mean, I've been having business ideas for the past 20 years. I followed up on only like less than 10 of them, less than 15 of them, but it's a practice. And so again, that means I know when I have ideas, oh, here's 10 ideas for Nick Nanton's next book. Hey, Nick, here they are. Don't worry about it. You don't have to come contact me back. Well, so every now and then, sometimes someone contacts me back and says, hey, you want to do this with me? Actually, Anthony Scaramucci, who you just spoke about, I had an idea for him because we were having a conversation. He was kind of ranking the past few presidents. And I said, you should write a book. And I kind of outlined it from, 45 presidents, worst to first. And, just rank from the worst to the best, all the presidents. And he's like, this is a good idea. You want to do it with me? But I already had things I was doing, so I couldn't. I said, you just do it. And, sometimes that's good enough because then you build goodwill. I'll give you an example. That's a very important example. Google, the website. When you go to Google, you say to Google, hey, Google, can you please tell me everything you know about motorcycles? And Google says, hey, I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know anything about motorcycles, but I did the research for you. Here are 10 websites that I think are the best websites about motorcycles. And by the way, here are 3 other websites that pay me to tell you that we like them, but we don't really. And then I go to the motorcycle site. Now, next time I need a site, I need some information about erectile dysfunction drugs. I'm not going to go back to the motorcycle site. I'm going to go back to Google because they were honest and they authentically told me these were the best. And we did the research. Hey, Google, now what do you think about ED drugs? And they'll do the same thing. So I feel like the Google technique was good enough to make Google a multi-trillion-dollar company. Now, as a human, I try to apply the exact same technique. I might not be worth $1 trillion because of it, but you never know what value you create. So if somebody comes to me or if I have ideas, give them freely. Google doesn't charge to give its ideas out. Give them freely and see what happens. You become the best. After that, you become the $1 trillion value.
I love that. Now, in our last couple minutes here, I'm going to summarize a book I have not read, but I think I understand it. Skip the Line is got to be about the fact, because I know you well enough, you can articulate that, everything isn't methodical. There are ways that are shortcuts that are often right in front of our eyes, but because everyone has always done it a certain way, we miss them. You can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I'm actually more interested in our last few minutes about you telling me about the fact that tell everyone when it's going to come out so they can buy it. But you went with a major publisher in that book, as opposed to most of your other books that I'm aware of are self-published. And I'm actually more interested in the distinctions and your, I know there's advantages, disadvantages to both, but just interested in your experience in that.
Yeah, and I'll explain also. Skip the line. And you are correct, and I'll explain in a slightly different way. I can remember every single microsecond over the past 40 years where someone told me I can't do something. Oh, you're a junior programmer at HBO and you want to pitch a TV show to the CEO? You can't do that. So I remember on the way to the CEO's office, someone telling me I could not go to his office for her own reasons, not my reasons, her reasons. She couldn't do that. Fast forward, someone who worked at JP Morgan. Oh, I want to be a hedge fund manager. I'm raising money now for a hedge fund. What, have you ever worked at an investment bank? No. Have you ever worked at a hedge fund? No. Did you go to business school? No. Well, you can't do that. And this was a guy who hated his life. He hated his job. He eventually tried to start a hedge fund, but then ended up back at a bank. But I did it. I started one. And then another time, and there's many times, another time, I remember I was doing stand-up comedy and I was about to do, for the first time ever, my first 60-minute set. 60 minutes is difficult to do. And seconds before I was going to go on, a comedian came up to me and said, yo, James, you can't skip the line here. Like, you got to pay your dues. You got to stand in line like all the other comedians. And then literally at that moment, the MC calls me to the stage and I'm supposed to go 60 minutes when this guy basically told me I was worthless until I stood in line. And so to anybody who's ever been frustrated like that, I wanted to put together a series of techniques and stories, not only of myself and others, but many techniques for how you can skip the line. How do you find what you're passionate about? How do you get good at it quickly? Forget the 10,000 hour rule. I come up with ways to use what I call the 10,000 experiment rule, where you can much more quickly get to the top 1% of your field so that you can monetize it. And, since that moment I did my first 60-minute set, I've toured all over the world doing comedy now. Everywhere from the Netherlands to, I'm going next week to the Mall of America in Minnesota. Catch me there. And so I wanted to do this. I hadn't seen anything like this written before in my particular way. A lot of times you see academic research. This is how you could learn. This is how you can memorize. But none of that stuff works. I used what actually worked and described the stories. So why did I go with a major publisher? I just wanted to shake things up. Like, I wanted to see, what it'd be like to, when you use Amazon. And by the way, people think when you say Amazon, it's just an ebook. Well, on Amazon, I do a paperback, I do an ebook. Sometimes I do a hardcover, I do an audiobook. You could do the whole thing as if you're your own publishing company. And Amazon and self-publishing is great. But I wanted to use HarperCollins because I knew this editor for over a dozen years and she wanted to work with me. And I wanted to try working with her. And I just wanted to go through the process. And every now and then you want to mix things up so people don't know what to expect and why. Everything's a story. So now, later on when I talk about my publishing experiences, I have this extra story of, okay, I went back to traditional, but now I'm also doing this audiobook thing with Charlemagne that came out of the blue. And you and I basically self-published your TV series. So it's always interesting. The media world is changing, and you could choose yourself to skip the line, to have a TV series, to publish a bestseller, to make your own game if you want, or to make your own clothing line, whatever it is you want to do. You can do it the traditional way. You could do it in a self-published, choose yourself sort of way, or you could do some sort of hybrid, which is what I always like to do.
I love it, James. Everyone needs to check out Skip the Line as soon as it comes out. Buy a copy of Choose Yourself. Of course, check out Choose Yourself, the James Altucher story on Amazon.com. And then and check out James on all the socials, everything you put out, James. I'm not just a friend. I'm glad to be a fan. Thanks so much for joining me on Now to Next, and we'll talk soon.
Me as well, Nick. Thank you so much for everything. And look, let's keep working together on stuff. I'm sure it'll be never ending. We meshed so well. It was a several-year process making your series, and it was a pleasure every moment of it.
I love it, man. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Now to Next. Take care, James. Hey, Nick Nanton here, and thanks for tuning in to Now to Next. I want to make sure you don't miss a single episode of this show on YouTube. So before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, just go into your settings and switch on notifications. Thanks for watching.